Ashton Jeanty's best fantasy fit is with the Chicago Bears. We'll tell you why next.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Magdziuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada Player of the Week later in the show. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Magdziuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. Kate, I'm so excited. The NFL draft is this week. I haven't even drank any cups of coffee because I'm just so excited. I don't even need them. I'm that pumped up for the draft. So on today's show, we're going to take a look at the top players at running back, wide receiver, and tight end in the NFL draft and pair them with their best fantasy fit, the team that would get the most out of them from a fantasy perspective. And Kate, let's start with Ashton Jeanty, the top running back in this class. He's been mocked to a bunch of teams, including Jacksonville today. We've seen the Raiders. We've seen the Saints. But here's my take. If Ashton Jeanty gets selected by the Chicago Bears at pick 10, or wherever they get him, maybe they trade up to get him, he's not only a top 5 dynasty running back, but he's number 1 overall. And in startup drafts, I would have a hard time putting him outside the top 5 overall players.
Whew. I mean, that is a bold statement, but let's look at the circumstances. The Chicago Bears are in a prime position to just be in the right range without having to finagle too much here, as long as the Raiders don't step on their toes, maybe at number 6 or the Jaguars at 5. But they are in the right kind of range to draft a running back. I think they've made enough investments along the offensive line. You've made the investment in a head coach that loves to run the football. Let's look at Ben Johnson's last 3 seasons with the Detroit Lions as OC. 13th in rush attempts in 2022, 7th in rush attempts in 2023, in 2024, 3rd in rushing attempts in the National Football League, 2nd in touchdowns, 6th in rushing yards. This is a situation that, Ben Johnson, I think, can really elevate his game and vice versa to the point where it's going to take a lot of pressure off of Caleb Williams. It's going to take a lot of pressure off the passing game because I think the run game is going to be so strong with this fit.
Yeah, I just think he's going to have a lot of opportunities for touchdowns, which obviously matter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think DeAndre Swift is going to scare you at all. Jeanty goes to the Bears. It's all systems go. They improved their offensive line this offseason. They added several interior guys. And with Caleb Johnson being on a rookie, Caleb Williams being on a rookie contract, with Ben Johnson wanting to win right now, I just don't think they would care about overworking Ashton Jeanty. I think he would get a bunch of touches in this offense. That's my favorite fit. Let's move over to RB2, Omarion Hampton, or at least RB2 for some people. Kate, where do you think Hampton could land that would give him the most fantasy value?
I really want to see him land with the Denver Broncos. Again, another head coach here in the National Football League who we know that offensive mind can be really good for running backs. Now, I know there haven't always been moments where maybe you're excited about the full workhorse volume. We know that Omarion Hampton is more than capable of being a workhorse, but what I really like about the fit is the offensive line. I think they are a top 5 unit in the National Football League. And generally speaking, I think Omarion Hampton is a guy who can create enough on his own that, man, if you're giving him some good blocking schemes too, and you're giving him a head coach that, with a rookie quarterback can take that offense to the point they were at in 2024, I feel like it could be all systems go here because there's a wide open plane here for a 3-down back, and Omarion Hampton fits that bill absolutely perfectly for me.
I got another landing spot. It's your Pittsburgh Steelers. We saw it with Najee Harris. While Najee wasn't the most dynamic running back, he averaged 18.7 touches per game over 4 years in Pittsburgh. We know that Arthur Smith is really good at designing run games. He's had some really productive running backs, including Tyler Algier, Bijan Robinson, and then, of course, Derrick Henry. And Pittsburgh wants to run the football. So if you put Omarion Hampton on the Steelers, and I understand not the best offense, but they do have two receivers that should stretch the field and open up stuff underneath. I just think there's very few landing spots where I think Hampton could go and immediately be locked in for 18 touches every single week. I know Pittsburgh's got their flaws, and I don't know if the Steelers would take him at 21, but I kind of think that's a really good landing spot for Hampton.
Yeah, and again, we look at Najee Harris and the fact that he saw this really significant workload, despite the fact that he wasn't even the most efficient running back in his respective backfield. Now, obviously, they brought back Jaylen Warren on a second-round tender this offseason. I don't think Jaylen Warren is viewed as the guy. And if he is viewed as a guy, the Steelers wasted a lot of time, assessing the last running back
deal. Like, there's just no long-term commitment there at all.
Absolutely. And I think for a team that has invested pretty significantly in the trenches over the last couple of drafts, they, dealt with some injuries there in 2024. But you look at, the kind of trajectory for growth for that offensive line between Troy Fautanu, who, we had a very limited sample size, but I think is going to be a huge asset along the right side. Broderick Jones, getting him back into his natural position at left tackle. Mason Cole, like, this is a group that I think is kind of built to run the football. You have an offensive coordinator that is building an offense to run the football. It's so Pittsburgh. Like, it feels like a Pittsburgh pick, even if I think they have other needs elsewhere. I could picture them being a little enamored.
All right, last one. TreVeyonn Henderson, who is a real wild card in this draft. A lot of people think he could potentially go top 20. It certainly seems like he's going to go inside the top 40 selections. Where would you like to see Henderson land where he gets the most fantasy value?
This is probably going to not maybe excite as many people as you might guess. But I do think the fit there could be super unique. So I'm going to ask you to hear me out on this one. What about the Houston Texans, who I think could go with, a wide receiver in this class? We've talked a lot about them sort of needing an option over the middle of the field, but Joe Mixon is on the older side. Joe Mixon, proven workhorse, a guy that can handle work on all three downs. TreVeyonn Henderson in a, Houston Texans offense, he doesn't need to touch the ball 20 times per game. You can rotate him into that lineup with a reliable option and Joe Mixon. And suddenly, like, you have this dynamic playmaker that you don't need to ask too much of right off the bat. He has that injury history. You can really kind of ramp him up at your own speed, but there's still plenty of room, I think, in that offense for a very explosive element in that run game.
Yeah, and I'm going to give you one, and I know this sounds cliche a little bit, but I love the fit of TreVeyonn Henderson with the Kansas City Chiefs. You look at that offense right now, and it's slow. Outside of Xavier Worthy, the running back room, Isaiah Pacheco ran a fast 40, but he doesn't play fast. Kareem Hunt, arguably the slowest running back in the league. Carson Steele played some last year. They signed Elijah Mitchell this offseason, but he never plays, so I can't really factor him in. It just seems like to me TreVeyonn Henderson is everything this offense needs, and he's everything that Andy Reid wants in a running back. Like, he's fantastic in pass protection. So he can play right away, protect Patrick Mahomes. He can be used as a receiver. He doesn't fumble the ball. One fumble in 666 touches. You get him on the field. He's everything I think they thought Clyde Edwards-Helaire would be, but he actually has the size to be a full-time running back that can hit home runs. The Chiefs have become more of a ball control offense. They desperately need somebody at the running back position that can create big plays. And I think TreVeyonn Henderson, the Chiefs would know how to use him and not overwork him. But I also think they could get him 15, 16 touches a game, and he would be 15 touches for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's where we want to see him land.
Yeah, I think you get that efficiency component there. And like you mentioned, they have become more of this ball control type of offense. And with a massive injury to Rashee Rice, pending suspension, it's really hard to ignore that glaring need at running back because they just haven't found that rhythm. And Isaiah Pacheco, again, for as much as we like the player, as long as we like him when he's on the field, he has had a pretty concerning injury history himself that isn't conducive to, I think, a full-time workload in the way that maybe the Chiefs would ideally structure this offense if they had that option.
And we should also mention Isaiah Pacheco last year of his deal, Kareem Hunt on a 1-year deal, Elijah Mitchell on a 1-year deal. Like this running back backfield could just look completely different by this time next year. You draft Henderson in round 1, you get the 5th-year option. And I just love that fit in an Andy Reid offense where you can utilize him in the screen game. He can do stuff off tackle. I would love to see it happen. We'll see if it does on draft night. All right, let's talk about the wide receivers, Kate. There's 4 receivers here that are likely going to go inside the top 40 or so picks. We'll tell you our favorite landing spots next. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? You can turn any TV into a gaming system and your entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. You can dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and so much more. It's as easy as streaming your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on Fire TV. With 4K streaming, you can watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On. That's all one word, Fire TV Locked On, to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, and Fire TV Cube. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. On today's show, we're taking a look at our favorite fits from a fantasy perspective going into the NFL draft. And Kate, let's go to the wide receiver position. And let's start with Tetairoa McMillan, who is the consensus #1 receiver in this class, behind Travis Hunter, of course. Where would you like to see him land to maximize his fantasy value?
Here's the thing. In, the top 10, let's say, there are a few teams that I can picture him entering the offense and being a target leader, or at least very close to it right away. I think my favorite fit in the top 10 is going to be the Las Vegas Raiders. And I know there's been a lot of conjecture about Ashton Jeanty to the Raiders, but I do think if this is an offense that they're going to look to get back to and kind of reevaluate everything, starting with Tom Brady on down to Pete Carroll, Geno Smith, they're reinventing everything. They got Brock Bowers, who's an absolutely incredible weapon over the middle of the field. They have Jacoby Myers, who's a really good wide receiver too. If you want to make an investment in that passing game, I think a threat like Tetairoa McMillan on the boundary is going to be one of your best options. You have that athleticism with a guy like Brock Bowers. He can create that separation over the middle. I do think, we can talk about maybe top end speed and the question marks that Tetairoa has with that top end speed, but with his play style, and if you have other options in this receiving game that are getting open with their, whether it be speed, athleticism, etc., I think that gives Tetairoa McMillan some grace. And I also think it offers something that they just don't have in this offense. And I don't necessarily know that they're going to find a better option either deeper in the draft. So I don't know, maybe go wide receiver round 1, come back round 2, grab a running back. I think that's your better value for position.
Yeah, I love that fit. I think Tet going to the Raiders makes a lot of sense. They just don't have an outside receiver. And we know that Geno Smith is good enough to give a lot of targets to that outside receiver. So I think that one makes a lot of sense. I'm also going to throw Carolina in there.
Yes.
I would like to see McMillan go to a team where he can be the focal point of a passing game, right? And maybe that's not into a situation with a super established quarterback, but I think we saw enough from Bryce Young, at least in the second half of the year, to feel like he's on the right track. If he goes and he's the #1 receiver for Carolina and Thielen and Leggett are more complementary players, I do think from a fantasy perspective, this is his best opportunity to earn like 140, 150 targets.
Oh, absolutely. And I do think just from like a theoretical standpoint, this makes sense, right? The Panthers, they hit the reset button when they benched Bryce Young last year. And I think it didn't seem very good at the time, but I do think, I mean, when you see the way Bryce Young played in the second half of last season, you understand that it probably was a good thing just to hit the reset button, even if it didn't feel great at the time. So when you see the way that he played, I think it becomes more important than ever to make sure you have the right pieces around him in order to evaluate whether he is truly your franchise quarterback of the future. Because I don't think under the current circumstances leading up to this point, they've had enough juice around Bryce Young to say like, okay, definitively this guy can't do it.
Let's go to Matthew Golden, who's widely expected to be the second receiver drafted after McMillan. Where would you like to see Golden land?
Golden is a tricky one for me, Marcus, and I'm going to bounce this back to you because Matthew Golden, I have been pretty adamant that I don't understand the evaluation of him as like a top 20 draft pick, right? But we've seen him very frequently mocked to the Dallas Cowboys. We've also seen running backs. We've seen Tetairoa McMillan. So as a team that's kind of in the mix for Matthew Golden, I want to hear your kind of feedback as
I don't think
Cowboys expert, etc.
I don't think Dallas is a great fit. I think it's a good NFL fit, but not from a fantasy perspective because CeeDee Lamb is just going to gobble up so many targets. So you're looking somewhere where he could be the de facto wide receiver one. And I actually think Denver makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Denver's going to be a frequent one for a lot of these players because they have Cortland Sutton, but he's not a lock to be there long-term. They've got Sean Payton, who has had some receivers like this before, but I think Golden by 2026 could be the number one player in this offense. And we saw last year, like Sean Payton is perfectly fine letting Bo Nix throw a bunch of passes. You look at the speed 4.29 and you would think this is a downfield threat, but that's not really the case. Golden does his best work within like 10, 12 yards of the line of scrimmage, which is very similar to what Bo Nix does. So Marvin Mims is the deep threat, but I think Golden can be the guy that comes in and is the focal point, and he's running a bunch of slants and comebacks and dig routes, and all of a sudden we see him get 110 targets as a rookie.
Yeah, I think that would be a really intriguing fit, especially after seeing sort of what Bo Nix was able to do last season. And again, you look at the play caller, you look at Sean Payton and what he sort of envisions this offense to be. I mentioned them as a good landing spot for Omarion Hampton as a play caller that can design a stable run game. But the passing game was far more efficient than it had any business being there in 2024. I think, guy that, you can have Cortland Sutton as your sort of stereotypical X and, Matthew Golden can play that Z role in the offense, I think makes a lot of sense, especially again, for somebody who can be a bit creative at times. You can get, Marvin Mims, some of those design touches, but Matthew Golden steps into that role of being more of that consistent target on a down-to-down basis.
All right, Kate, our next receiver is Luther Burden, who is one of my favorite players in the entire class. I think there's a good chance he doesn't go in round one. It seems like he's been falling on the consensus board, and that's okay. From a fantasy perspective, I want him to land with the Tennessee Titans at the top of round two. They're going to draft Cam Ward in round one at 1 overall, but they desperately need more playmakers. And I look at that roster, and it's Calvin Ridley, and then nothing really else. I think,
man, come on.
Nothing else right on this offense. I see Burden coming in. He can be the slot receiver right away. He can do a lot of the design touches. If you want to just give him some of the pop passes, the screens, as they make Cam Ward comfortable. I think Luther Burden at the top of round two would not only be a great fit for Tennessee, I think it'd be a really good fit for Luther Burden.
I also, this is kind of a weird side point to make on the fit, but I also think like, if that's the case, right? If Luther Burden goes to Tennessee, suddenly they have not just a bunch of, like they have, some wide receivers, they have some running backs, but like you add Luther Burden into the mix, and I think suddenly it becomes sort of this team of weapons. Like Tony Pollard, a weapon. Yeah. He's explosive as a runner. You can throw him in the slot. You can do a lot of different things with Tony Pollard, right? Tajay Spears, a similar mold. He's been pretty effective so far in his career. We know he's kind of a one contract guy, but like can do a little bit of everything. You can utilize him as a receiver. You look at Calvin Ridley. He can be your boundary guy. So like I suddenly look at that and I'm like, ooh, this offense has some toys where that can open things up tremendously when you don't necessarily know what kind of role each player is going to play on an every down basis because they have diverse skill sets. That becomes intriguing for me when I'm looking at the Tennessee Titans, because I think in general, that feels like a solid move and a solid direction to go in if you want to take some pressure off your new rookie quarterback.
And I want to add in Emeka Egbuka before we go. I think Houston at 25 makes a lot of sense. You pair him back with CJ Stroud, where Egbuka had his best season in college football under Stroud. And I just think Egbuka needs to be somewhere where he's the clear number 2 and somewhere where he can be the slot receiver. And with Nico Collins on the roster, it's a perfect fit. Like Egbuka fills in the rest of the gaps. He does all the underneath stuff. Maybe you're hoping he could be like the Amon-Ra St. Brown in that offense. I think Houston at 25 is my favorite fantasy fit. I just don't see very many situations where he walks in and he's the target leader. But with a good quarterback and with a good number 1 taking the attention away, I think he could put up like Jordan Addison type of numbers there.
I like that fit a lot.
All right. Let's talk about some tight ends, because this is one of the ones that's really hard to figure out. Where are Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland going, and how might that impact their fantasy value? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Nissan. The Armada Player of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, we're taking a look at a draft prospect that stands apart, the guy that we believe showcases the strength and power needed to push their team forward in 2025. And this week's Armada and Clear-Cut Player of the Week is Tyler Warren from Penn State, who did a little bit of everything for the Nittany Lions, played quarterback, tight end, even was used as a running back at times. He's one of the most durable and heavy-duty and rugged players in the class. And it's the same thing about the Nissan Armada. All the same adjectives we can be used to describe the Armada and Tyler Warren. And when it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer. And that's exactly what I think Tyler Warren is going to do at the next level. It's clear that our player of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or in any of their other outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Mock Draft Show, available now on Locked On NFL Draft. Go inside the Locked On War Room for all 32 picks in this ultimate 7-episode series. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft, available now on Locked On NFL Draft's YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Kay, let's talk about the top 2 tight ends in this class. Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland. Where does Warren need to go to maximize his fantasy value?
I think his max value, and this is a potential connection that I've talked about before. I want to see him so badly go to the Jacksonville Jaguars at pick number 5. They need a blue chip guy, right? They need a guy to work alongside, Brian Thomas Jr. They need a weapon in the offense, because what they did all offseason was let go of weapons that played various roles within their respective offense. They moved on from Christian Kirk. They moved on from Evan Ingram, 2 of their biggest threats over the middle of the field. You want a weapon? Weapon is Tyler Warren's middle name. It's Tyler Weapon Warren. And I do think that,
yeah, go ahead.
When I'm looking at the Jacksonville Jaguars, that's what they need. And you already made the financial investment in your quarterback. You found a really great, outstanding wide receiver value in Brian Thomas Jr. get this guy that can be utilized as a Swiss Army knife all over the formation, and suddenly things are looking a lot brighter. Like I think he's a great fit in this particular offense with Liam Cohen, with the changing of the guard here.
And I want to say Colston Loveland. I think there's a lot of fits where he would make sense. The Bengals, the Colts, obviously the Bears are one, but I want to see him land with the Chargers because they so desperately need another pass catcher outside of Ladd McConkey. You pair him back up with Jim Harbaugh, and now Justin Herbert finally has that tight end that can beat single coverage, that can be his version of Travis Kelce in the AFC West. I think there's a chance that Loveland could fall to the Chargers at 22. I could also see the Chargers just making a move to go up and get him, but adding him to that offense would be a perfect fit.
I mean, he is a excellent receiving option, like big playability, runs routes like the converted wide receiver that he is, gives you that, again, kind of just a giant target for, your quarterback to feel comfortable just kind of chucking it up. We know Justin Herbert's a tall guy. Why not get him a tall guy working the middle of the field? Kind of the opposite of a Ladd McConkey situation. Yeah. Now, the only question I have about that fit is I do feel like they need some options along the boundary, but when I'm also looking at where they're picking, Colston Loveland feels like he'd be the best fit at that point with, presumably Tetairoa McMillan off the board at that point. I think Colston Loveland could be a nice grab for the Chargers and for Justin Herbert's fantasy value, which we've seen kind of fluctuate over the past year, up, down. I think this could be a really exciting fit.
And the last thing I want to say about Loveland before we head out is that Michigan really used him only as a short option in the passing game. I think that's mostly because of the quarterback play. Even JJ McCarthy was pretty inexperienced in 2023. So we didn't see them targeting Loveland a lot down the field, but I absolutely think he can do it. His athleticism is awesome for a tight end. So you have someone like Herbert who is really good at throwing down the middle of the field. And maybe we see him more on seam routes instead of having a tight end that's only averaging 10 yards a catch. Maybe all of a sudden now he's averaging 12, 13 yards. That's where I think Loveland, if you can get paired with the right quarterback in the right system, I think we can see a part of his game be unlocked that we just have never seen before.
I love that. I think
Loveland.
Love Loveland. I need a t-shirt.
Yeah, there you go. All right, that is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcast. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.